All right, folks. Well, yeah, as Tom said, welcome. This is my talk, Intro to CDS. No, not CDS. DataFlex Pro. Nope, not that either. Intro to Dataverse inside of Microsoft Power Automate. So this is my, I like to poke fun at Microsoft and their naming conventions and their renaming conventions. And so a little bit of history that, we've had a couple of different names. And actually, this does become slightly important later on. So I'll mention some of the issues that, since they renamed a few things, can be tricky to deal with. But yes, my talk, Intro to Dataverse inside of Power Automate. My name is Dave Patrick. I'm a little bit about me. I'm MVP, MCT, MABCDEFG. I've taken a lot of exams. I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer. I've got the MVP award from Microsoft, so I do a lot of community stuff. If you want to read more about me, go out to my LinkedIn and feel free to connect with me. I work for a company called DSA, Data Systems Analyst. If you're interested in a job at DSA, I have a link there to check out some of our openings. And I also run a user group called Mad SharePoint that since for a while now, we've been doing hybrid meetings and virtual meetings. So we're all virtual now, but eventually we'll get back to hybrid meetings and you guys can come join us in person. But for now, join us online for our monthly user group meetings. I'd like to do a quick shout out to my daughter who just gave her presentation over on channel 2, I think it was. She and I have this talk, I guess, a video blog called Patrick Perspective. So you can go out to that link and check it out, where we kind of commiserate on some of the challenges of technology and talk about new and upcoming stuff that we find interesting. So we just completed season 1, or I think there might be one more episode coming out in season 1, and then we're going to start a whole new season, just like Netflix. We'll drop a new season coming up soon. So feel free to check out our past episodes and look forward to some future episodes coming up. Thanks to our host. So Tom kicked us off here, and there's also some other folks behind the scenes helping out. And I really want to, thanks to the tech platform for putting this on, and Manpreet and Jason and Michael and Raul. Without these guys, kind of behind the scenes doing all the work, they make us look good because we just come in, and speak for an hour, but they're there all day making sure everything's running smooth. So I really want to shout out to these folks and say thanks for all their efforts. All right. So from this talk, what do I want you guys to get? I want you to understand what is Dataverse and why you might want to use it. I want to get into the how. I'm a big hands-on. I understand something when I can actually do something with it. So I'm going to show you how to connect the data in Dataverse using a flow in Power Automate. So you get a lot of bang for your buck there. You're learning how to get data in Dataverse. You're learning how to pull it out in Power Automate. And shoot, we'll even put it in SharePoint to kind of finish the loop there. So moving data from one data repository to another repository. And then we'll throw in how to, if I want to report on that data, how do I get to it from a tool like Power BI? So a lot of good stuff from this talk, hopefully. We'll start again with a little bit of history. It used to be called the Common Data Service, and for a hot second, they were going to call it Dataflex Pro. But then there were some copyright issues, and they decided, nope, it's now called Dataverse. So a cool new name. It's Microsoft's data base in the cloud, and it is part of the Microsoft Power Platform. So Office 365 works really well with Azure and Dynamics 365 and your own standalone applications, as long as it connects to there's so many different data connectors that Dataverse can work with, SharePoint being one of them. It talks to the AI builder. Portal, I don't have portals on here, but portals is a new thing for external users to get access to your Dataverse. So it really is plugged into the whole Power Platform. It's easily, when you have your data in Dataverse, it's easily to work with all of these things, and as we'll see with a couple of demos. So again, digging into what is it? I'm using a website here called Microsoft Learn. If you're not familiar with Microsoft Learn, you really should be. People think of it as just documentation, but it's so much more than that. It's tutorials and quick starts, and there's free Azure sandboxes where you can use Azure resources without having to spend any money or using any of your own credits. There's exam preparation. There's sometimes free cloud challenges that where Microsoft will give you for completing the cloud challenge a voucher to take a free Microsoft exam. So check it out. This particular article defined what is Microsoft Dataverse, and I think it's really well written. It basically talks about how it is stored in the cloud securely, lets you manage it through the browser. It's basically tables and rows. So if you're familiar with data in general from the fundamental standpoint, you're going to be really familiar with Dataverse in the cloud. It, as I mentioned, it's easy. Why is it? I said it's easy to manage, but why is it easy to manage? Because you can work with both the metadata, that's the data about the data, things like the data type, if it's an integer, if it's a number, if it's a string, as well as, the limits, the min, the max, different validation rules. So logic and validation, you can create calculated columns, all this in the browser. So you don't have to be running a certain operating system. You don't have to be loading certain tools. Very easy to do through the browser. It's all stored in the cloud. Also easy to secure using existing Office 365 and AD groups, Active Directory and Azure groups. If you're using something like Dynamics 365, whether it's, Great Plains or CRM or one of their applications, which a lot of people are, you're already using Dataverse. So you can connect. It's very easy to connect to that data using tools like Power Apps. I mentioned the rich metadata, the different data types, not just the data types, but the different relationships. So you have that full fidelity relational database. So you have, you can have that primary key to foreign key constraints and make sure you have data integrity in place. So it really allows you to do everything you could with, say, something like SQL Server. Microsoft Excel is fully supported. There's a really cool add-in that will show you, so you can do create, read, update, delete, all of your favorite database operations from within Microsoft Excel, which is kind of mind-blowing when you first think of it, because Microsoft Excel, most people are used to it being this read-only type tool. You go and you get some data, and then you build these charts and things like that. But with the Dataverse add-in, or the Office 365 add-in, it allows you to really connect and send data back and forth to Dataverse. So a lot of my Excel users love that for working with data that's stored in Dataverse, and we'll do a little bit of demo of that as well. So let's look at what it looks like. So this is the Power Apps portal in my browser, and what I've done here is I've clicked on data on the left-hand navigation, and then under that I clicked on tables. Now this is a slightly older screenshot, but I left this in on purpose. This is one of those things where the names changed. So they did change. They used to call it entities. That's been renamed to tables. But sometimes, if you're depending on what the scripting you're doing, or maybe an action you're using, you might still see something. You might see the word entity, and so you should be aware that that means tables now. But this is, by clicking on that, you'll see some of the tables, aka entities, that are standard in Dataverse. So by default, you get an account entity or an account table. And you can see that they're all, standard or managed. You get an address, so, storing your customer addresses. You get an activity. You get things like ad placement. So depending on what kind of data you're trying to keep track of, they, for the most part, they're going to have an entity for that. And if they don't, you can go up here and you can create custom entities. So you can do new tables. And I'm using entities and table interchangeably. They're the same thing. But yeah, so there's even the capability to create your own. Once you have those created, you can go to that the data, and you can do things like, let's get the data out of there. We can export it to all sorts of different places. We can do a get data and then analyze it in. This is ingesting the data, right? We're going to bring data in. This is taking the data out. And then here we say, you know what? You're supposed to be integrated with Power BI. You should know how to talk to Power BI without, what is it? When we say integrated and they talk to each other, what does that mean? It means that it's not a whole lot of work, not a lot of clicks to get that, to get one connected to the other. And that's exactly what I'm showing you here. You click on data from within Dataverse, you click Analyze in Power BI, and the next thing you know, you're downloaded a data connection file that knows what environment you want to connect to, the credentials you need to do the connection, and that's what we're seeing here. I opened up that file that downloaded when I clicked that link, and it's connected to my this URL uniquely identifies the specific environment that I was in, and you can see the different entities or tables that are available in that environment. And then it even gives me a little preview of some of the data that is just a couple of rows. And it's not going to pull all the data because it wants to be performant. But now from Power BI, if you're familiar with Power BI, you can do things like load the data, or if you want to manipulate it a little bit, there's the old transform data, which gives you that extract, transform, load, otherwise known as ETL. And you can do some really cool things like calculate some other columns, or split the data, split columns, or remove errors, all sorts of cool stuff there. But in this particular example, all I did was say, hey, I want to pull in the data using Power BI's recommended visuals. So if you've used Power BI, a lot of times you just click on a couple pieces of data. And in this example, I said, show me the website as on the axis, and then show me the revenue as a value, and Power BI said, you know what, I think maybe a bar chart might make sense in this situation, and indeed it does. And if you're familiar with Power BI, you know you could come over here and very easily choose a different visualization, maybe a pie chart, or maybe even use R if you want to do advanced visualization. But out of the box, my end users love this because, again, a couple of clicks and all of a sudden they can get that intelligence from the data. They can say, look, and it's very obvious that CP&L is by far our highest revenue customer versus the Coho Winery. Something's going wrong with these two guys. Maybe we need to do some more sales calls and try to draw up some more business because they're at the bottom end of the spectrum. So really, really powerful, taking my data that's in Dataverse, connecting into Power BI, and within a few minutes, I've got some actionable charts that I could pin to a dashboard and share with my account reps or whoever needs to access that data. Going back to Power Apps, back to Dataverse, I want to talk a little bit more about the metadata that's available. So we talked about metadata, data about the data, and that's what we're looking at here. So by clicking on a particular table or entity, this is the account table, I'm now looking at the attributes or columns that make up that table. So you can see that there's an account name, an account number. We have things like whether it's unique or text, whether it's required or optional. So that's what I mean about some of that metadata that's very easily, again, I'm just in the browser here walking through the schema of my data, and I can add new fields, just like I can add new entities. I can add new fields or columns if I want to customize, and maybe there's something in here that I don't have that I need. I can set up different relationships if I, maybe this account has an employee that's assigned to it and I need to make a relationship to enforce that business rule. There's other business rules I can add. I can create different views. I can create forms for data entry. I can set up dashboards to report on the data, different charts that will be included on those dashboards, set up additional keys. And then my favorite here is if I want to actually work with the data, I can work with it right in the browser. So if I'm looking at my accounts and this is the schema, but now I actually want to see the data, I click on that data tab, and now I'm into the data. So I'm actually looking at the data in my browser, and I can see I've got a couple different data entries here. These are my, quote unquote accounts that I'm working with, and I can see the phone numbers and all that other great stuff. So Dataverse, again, makes it really easy to store your data in the cloud, make it accessible in the cloud, make the schema, the metadata accessible, make the actual data accessible. It really, the different views are up here in the corner. Right now I'm looking at active accounts, but I can have different views of the data. So really the flexibility and the power is really something special. Now, what if I want to work with that data? Okay, great, Dave, you logged into the browser, you saw that data, but I've got some SharePoint folks and they spend most of their time in SharePoint. Can you get that data out of Dataverse and stick it into SharePoint? Maybe if we take a scenario, I like to use kind of a real world scenario. I've had to ask before with Dave, my CRM people, they're putting in accounts, right? If I back up a second. So they're entering new accounts all, maybe not all day long, but every now and then a new account gets added. I'd love it in SharePoint to just surface that so that people who don't have to go into CRM, they don't have to log into Dataverse. They can just, while they're in SharePoint, maybe there's a page that displays new accounts. Can you do that for me? And the answer is yes. What you can do using an automated flow, we can connect to Dataverse. We can say, hey, let me know when there's a new account. And when there is, go take a copy and throw it into a SharePoint list so those SharePoint people can see it. And that's what we're going to look at today. How can we do that? That was the ask. How will we do that? So to initiate a flow from Dataverse, we have to use a trigger. And guess what? There's some built-in triggers we can use. There's actually triggers for when a record gets selected or created or deleted or updated. And this sounds, very similar to what I said earlier about the CRUD operations, right? You got create is the C in CRUD, read is selected, update it and delete it. So it supports, there are triggers for all 4 database operations. That's what we see down here. And again, I kind of included some of the older screenshots back when it used to be called Common Data Service. They have since come out with new triggers that actually say Dataverse, and we'll show you those in a second when we do the demo. In fact, let's do the demo. So let's jump out here and jump to my Power Apps environment. So I'm using a developer tenant, and at the end I'll put up a link where if you guys want to get your own free developer tenant from Microsoft. I'll show you how you can do that. It's great because using your own tenant, I don't have to worry about messing up production. I don't have to worry about bumping heads with another developer. Maybe they step on my toes or anything. I actually make all my developers where I work at the DSA. I'll say go get your own developer tenant. That way you can build your web parts. You can create your own entities, and you're not going to knock heads with anyone else. So this is my developer tenant, and you can see specifically I'm in my own environment. So even if you were in a production environment, you would probably have your own environment. So even in my developer tenant, this is sort of the default is managed SharePoint. That's when I first set it up. But then I signed up for my own developer or Dataverse, right? And that's what I'm switching to. So be careful. This can bite you in the butt sometimes if you're not in the right one and something doesn't look right. If a flow is missing or the data is missing or something like that. First thing I like to check is make sure I'm in the tenant that I think I should be in. So I want to make sure I'm in my tenant, or excuse me, my environment. And then from there, I'm going to go to Dataverse and then look at the tables. So this is the Dataverse data. Notice it no longer says entities, it says tables. So from here, there's those entities or tables that I showed you earlier, and this is where I can go into one of them and say, you know what, let's go into the account entity table, and let's see some of those things that we talked about. So the relationships, the business rules, the columns, they're all here in Dataverse. Looks like I haven't set up any business rules for this particular table, but if I wanted to, you could. So it looks like, but I've got some things set up. Let's go to the data. And here's where you can see some of those accounts. And this is where, if I added a record, and I can do this either through the Dataverse portal, or if I was in CRM, you can see it says up there, the URL, you can actually see the CRM. So no matter if I'm just using an app in CRM and it's going to show up in the same place, and then this is where I could, maybe I like to put in different fast food places. So maybe let's see, what's one place? Taco Bell. I probably already have Taco Bell in here. Let's see if we can add them. So my account name is set up as a prime. Yeah, I figured it's a duplicate, so we won't do that one. We'll just merge it. How about that? If it wasn't a duplicate, I have to think about a new fast food joint to add. So when we do our demo, but you get the idea. That's how I would add a new record. So let's go. Oh yeah, that's what I get for using the old back button. Let's just close that window. There we go. What do we want to do in this demo? What we want to do, I've got my little cheat sheet here of demos I want to do. So we'll just drag this over here. The first thing we want to do is create that flow that's going to look for the new records and put them into SharePoint. So how do we do that? We got to go to Flow, right? Or Power Automate. So Power Automate, which by the way is just flow.microsoft.com. We'll go there and we'll say, let's click on my flows to see what kind of flows that we have. And you can see there's different kind of flows. There's cloud flows, desktop flows, business process flows, some flows that somebody else did that have shared with me. It looks like no one's sharing any flows with me. I'm going to do a cloud flow, and I've already done one, but you can see I've got other ones I've turned off. Let's do a brand new flow. So we'll say new flow, and I'm going to start from my blank automated cloud flow. Now I could do from a template. The template's kind of cool because there's all these built-in templates. And if you saw Sarah's presentation earlier, I think she picked one of the ones that were in here that got her started. But there's just so many. So usually if you're looking for some, you might want to put like some sort of filter there to kind of to narrow it down. I'm going to start from a blank one. So let me go back, and I want to just say I want to do a new flow from a blank, build from blank, and I want it to be automated, because automated means that it's going to be based on some trigger, like data being entered. An instant one would be, someone presses a button or something like that, maybe clicks a link. Scheduled would be, based on some date and time, and then there's other kind of flows that use, more visual components to start them. But we're going to just do the automated cloud flow. So we'll give this one a name. We'll call this new account notification. And then from there, we're going to say this is going to be triggered off of what? There's lots of different triggers to choose from. So just like I did with templates, I'm going to try to limit this a little bit, and I'll type in Dataverse because I know that's what I'm trying to pull data from. So at least there, now I've got a smaller set of choices. So I want when a row is added, modified. So this sounds like a good, it's one of the, what did I say, when it's added. So that sounds like a good option. Notice there are some other ones. These down here used to work, but and I guess they're deprecated, they're legacy. So they're meant to be, they're going away at some point in time. So if you see that, it means, they're still working, especially if you already have a flow that's using that, but we're gonna, don't do those, use one of these newer ones. So that's what we'll choose. We'll choose this guy, and we'll say create. And then from there, we're presented with the flow template to fill out what we want this trigger to be based off of. So in this case, we said we want it whenever a new account gets created. So let's see what choices we have here. I think one of them is added. And you can see if we could be added or deleted, added or modified, added, modified or deleted, all sorts of the options. We'll just keep it simple. We'll go with added. So now which table, which entity did I want this to trigger off of? And I said account, but there's all entities that are available to choose from. So we'll do account all the way at the top there. And then the scope says, okay, was this just for a certain business unit in your organization, or is it for the whole organization, or maybe a child, a subset, a child business unit, maybe just a certain user? I'm going to say it's for the whole organization. Just anyone in the organization adds an account, I want this flow to trigger. Next, I got to say, what do I want to happen, right? So first is, okay, this is why you're going to trigger. Now, what action is going to occur? So again, it's so many actions to choose from. You can see, oh my gosh, there's so many actions. Let's try to narrow it down a little bit. Let's type in SharePoint because we know that's what we're triggering, or we're targeting the data to go to. So if I put SharePoint in there, if I could spell it right, it does filter me. Even though I spelled it wrong, it knows what's going on. It's got just the SharePoint action. So what do we want? We want to create an item in a SharePoint list, and I look down there and I see it. So we'll say create item. And just like we did earlier, it's now saying, okay, well, where are you going to create this item at? So let me jump up here and find out what site, what I have to ask my user, what site do you want this to be created in? So I go to my main, in this particular developer tenant, it's the main site is my SharePoint site. And they might have said, you know what, Dave, why don't you put it in a site called accounts? So let me go see, do I have a site called accounts? I think I do. If I go to my site contents, there's one called accounts. So we'll go to the account site, and then looks like there's already a new account list. So we could use that, or we could create a brand new one. So we'll use this one. So we'll go ahead and grab that account or that list in that site and say, when they do a new one, this is where we're going to put the new item. So back to our flow and say, here's the address of where we want the accounts, and we don't want the whole thing. We just, and it's actually smart enough to, that's actually pretty cool, right? So even though I pasted in the whole darn site address that included the site, the list, and the view, the form said, yeah, I just want this part of it. I just need the site address. So I appreciate it truncating that for me. And then down here, now it's saying, hey, which list? And it's actually, there's only, I think, one eligible list in that particular site. That's why I chose it. So we'll do the new accounts list. From there, notice what it did. It went out and it queried that particular site and queried that list and saw which columns were available. So if I go back for a quick second, there's a title column that I can populate and a phone number column that I can populate. And that's what populated in my flow, those two columns. So what I have to do now is choose which data from Dataverse is going to map to those columns. So we'll do that. We'll click on the first column and say, all right, we know it's coming from the account. So I've got things like the account name, the city, the street. So account name sounds pretty good to go to title, right? If there's a new account that's been added to my accounts list, let's display the name in the title field in SharePoint. And I could do more. I could do an expression. I could do some calculator. I could actually concatenate maybe the name plus the address if I wanted more information. But for now, we'll just keep it simple and we'll just do a direct account name to title. And the same thing for phone number. Now, phone number is not required, so I could leave it blank. But I'll go ahead and pick a phone number. And it's a little tricky. There's a lot of phone numbers. There's a main phone number. There's a phone number associated to each address. So you do have to be careful when you're working with your customers and you're asking, look at this, there's a 2, 3, 4, whatever. In this case, I maybe I talked to my customer and they said, hey, I want that phone number right when I first do that ad. That's the main phone number. So let's use that. So make sure we get that right. All right, I think we've got what we want. So let's go ahead and save this. Now, if I filled in everything correctly, I should, after it saves, get up my flow checker. This is a tool up here that'll go through and make sure that I've done everything correctly, and it will give me a warning if I did anything wrong. And if I haven't done anything wrong, it just sits there and kind of looks and doesn't say anything. So let me intentionally do something wrong, see if I can make the flow checker holler at me. It's already giving me so it's already not just the flow checker hollering at me, but you can already see that what happened was it went out there and tried to make a call to that site that is incorrect, and it's already coming back with a, this is not a good response. But even this is what I want to show you is the flow checker is now saying, hey, you've got a site address that's not valid. You've got to have a valid site address to enter in there. So the flow checker is nice that if you do something wrong, and it's, in this case, I did a really obvious thing, but if I had done something a little less obvious, like left those blank, I think I'll get a flow checker problem there. No flow checker. It likes me leaving it. I don't think it really likes that blank. Let me hit save. Yeah, so now that I hit save, it's saying, hey, you can't leave title blank. Title is required. So again, flow checker kind of helps you out so you can't kind of fat finger something and get it wrong. So again, we'll go back and put the account name and phone, main phone is what we were looking for. So we'll put main phone in there. All right, save that. And again, flow checker, if everything is good, it won't holler at me. I've already hit save, so we should be able, we're ready to test this flow. In order to test it, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. I can use this little test up here. The first time you create your flow, you have to manually run a test. So that's why automatically is grayed out there and I can't choose that, right? That's not ready yet, because what the automatically says is if you've already done some testing, you can reuse one of those runs and don't have to re-enter data. But for the manual tests, the very first one, I'm going to have to go enter some data. So let's do that. So we'll go over to Dataverse, and we're going to add a record and see if I can figure out one I haven't added. So we'll do add record. And I don't think I've added Lido's Pizza. I love me some Lido's Pizza. It's a pizza that they're famous for serving square pizza. So we'll do Lido's Pizza, and we'll say their number is somewhere in where I'm at, which is in Maryland. All right, see if we can save Lido's Pizza. Now I'm thinking about pizza. Let's go ahead and add a Bertucci's too, because I also love Bertucci's. So let's save and close that, and then we'll add another one. And this time we'll add Bertucci's Pizza. All right, we'll save and close that one. So now that I've added a couple of records, they should be there in my, what was the one I added? Lido's. So down there we should see an L, and then maybe I gotta refresh this data. Let's see. And then there's Bertucci's, and then Lido's is probably down there. Yeah, there's Lido's. So what should have happened, if I go back to my flow, is I should see, if I go back to the overview of my flow, a history, and then sure enough, there it is. So this is a 28-day run history, and the last one just a few seconds ago succeeded. We can click on that, and we'll get a little bit of detail of what went right in this example. So it'll show me, hey, an account came in. It gives me the JSON, the JavaScript object notation. That's how the data was passed, the format of the data that gets passed from Dataverse to SharePoint or to Flow and then on to SharePoint. So I get things like when it was done, the account ID, this is, again, if something goes wrong, that's usually typically where, maybe the phone number didn't come over, and I'll go through and see if the phone number was really passed or not. So in addition to that, I can see that was what was passed in from Dataverse, the input, and then I can see what was sent over to SharePoint. So if I expand on that, I can see, we went and this is the list that we hit, this is the site, the list, this is the information that we sent over. And again, there's a little bit of some of the data is actually encapsulated in JSON, and I can kind of look at all that. So once I feel good about all that, I can go back to SharePoint and refresh my list. Oh, I didn't even have to refresh. Look at that, Lido Pizza. So it looks like I have two triggers running at the same time. I didn't turn that other one off I had created earlier, so that's why it's in here twice. Let me actually fix that. So we'll go back to Power Apps, or I'm sorry, Flow. and go back to my flows. We don't need two of them hitting the same list. Let's turn this other one off. We'll come in here and say, you know what, we don't need double the work, so we'll turn you off. And then this is our new one that we just created. So now if I do a third one, let's add one more. Go back to my, add another record. So I'll add, used to be a place called Pizza Pizza. That's Little Caesars, isn't it? We'll just call it Pizza Pizza. That. And now in SharePoint, I should get just one Pizza Pizza. So let's refresh this window and see if Pizza Pizza came in here. See Litos. Let's actually get rid of some of these duplicates. And there's Pizza Pizza showed up. So again, if I go back to my run history, now I should have 3 successful runs, and I do. The one that just ran, the one that ran, you know, what we have? Litos, we had Petrucci's, and then we had Pizza Pizza, which was the most recent one. So a lot of good information in there, a lot of, and it was just that easy to grab data from Dataverse and then send it over to some other data repository like SharePoint by using Flow. Let's go back and look at Dataverse. And again, one of the things I mentioned was that, okay, great, Dave, you've got all these tables. What if you have an entity that doesn't, you know, that one doesn't exist already? And you can see I've done one here earlier, cat. It's custom because, you know, maybe I want to keep track of people's cats. So I did a new table to keep track of cats. And I think I did one for dogs. So I think I even did one for fish. You know, maybe I could do one for favorite restaurants. So if you know, whatever the entity that you might need to keep track of, if it's not in the list of current entities, you can go into new table. And just like if you put on your database administration hat, you come in, you give it a name. So we'll call this restaurants. Restaurants. I can't spell it. Food places. How about that? Food places. And actually, I'll say food place, because look at this, it actually does the plural for me. I know there's a debate between database administrators as whether you should pluralize your entity names or not. So this one pluralizes it for me. Comes up with an internal name, it chooses a primary name by default. I can choose whether or not I want to enable attachments so people can put like pictures or whatnot. And there's a whole bunch of other settings that I might want to do, like a description or table type or all sorts of good things. So we'll go ahead and just create this simply now, just call this food places. And then from here is where I can add additional columns. So I added a new table, food place, and then I'm going to come in here and say, all right, name, maybe there's a price range, you know, maybe call this, maybe there's max price. That wouldn't be text, that would be a number. Currency sounds good, right? Maybe this is optional. Maybe some people wouldn't know when they add a new record, whether I want it to be searchable. I could give it a description, you know, max menu item price, something like this. We add that. And not only do we now see the max price that I added, which is a custom column in my custom table, but we see some of the system metadata, created by, created on, sequence number. So there's a lot of actually system metadata that gets added to your new table that if you weren't aware of, it's easy to see through the Dataverse portal here. So once you have that in place, just like you, oh, did I not save my changes? Got to make sure I save my table. So I'm glad Dataverse warned me about that. Once you save your changes, you can go back and add data just like you would with any standard table or entity. So if I, you know, wanted to add, you know, different restaurants here, I could. I could come in here and say, all right, let's add, let's see, where are we? Let's go to where, yeah, let's go to data. Now, you might be saying, Dave, you know, this is great. You can add these columns here, but you know, it gets a little old to come in here. What if I've got 50 restaurants? I'm just starting out, and oh, I got to go set my permissions on that, but we'll come back to that. You know, what if I've got a ton of records to add, and you don't want to have to just one at a time. So if we go back, for example, to our accounts table, maybe we have a bunch of new accounts and we don't want to have to enter them one at a time. One thing you can do is use your favorite tool, Excel, to get that data in very rapidly, right? Maybe you already have the list in Excel and you want to just import them in. So if you edit data in Excel, this is going to open that Excel spreadsheet that has the Dataverse add-in already loaded and already connected to your environment. So now I'll go ahead and enable this. I trust it. It's going to load the data, the Office add-in, the Power Apps Office add-in. That's the proper name. I'm going to say, yes, I trust you. And what that's going to do is it's going to attempt to sign into Dataverse from Excel. And then if I successfully have signed in, it will connect to that environment. It's got all that information in the file and connect to that table. And so now it knows, hey, we're in the account table where we've got the account name is our mandatory identifier field, and I can come in here and work with my data in batch mode, right? So maybe I want to update this one, and maybe this doesn't taste as good anymore. So we'll just say, tastes okay. Maybe AdventureWorks is now AdventureWorks 2022. So I can do updates, I can do deletes. Maybe we'll delete this record. Maybe, so what do we, I'm keep track of which one we deleted. That was FabCam. And then if we want to add new records, right, we can come in here and then we can add things like Little Caesars. And now once we've done a delete, we've done a couple updates, and we've done an addition. I'm all done. I want to send those changes back up to Dataverse. I can just publish, and now it's going to look. It looked through all my changes and said, look, you've added one row, you've updated 2 rows, and you've removed a row. You want to send all those changes back up? I'll say, yes, I do. And now it's communicating with Dataverse and doing those create, read, update, delete operations and sending anything back. So if we jump back over to our browser here and refresh. So this, instead of tastes even greater, this should update and say tastes okay. Fabricam is going to go away, and we should have a new entry for Little Caesars. So, yep, tastes okay. And scroll down to the F's. There's no F's. Well, there's 5 guys, and then Little Caesar shows up now. So, using this, it's a really great way to work with your data in a tool that's familiar with that your users are already really familiar with. That being Excel. What else do we want to show? If we go back to not that one, but our history. This is sort of some of the gotchas that you might run into. So one thing I run into when I'm doing my flows to Dataverse is when I share them. So if I come out and say, you know what, let's share this with somebody. We'll go and share this, one of my coworkers. Oh, I don't have I haven't started I don't have the right permission to share this one, but if I did on one of my other accounts, I do have the right licensing, then I can share it. And what will happen is it'll move to shared my shared entry. So sometimes I got to be careful and say, hey, where did I shared it. The other thing is if you go into one of these and you go to edit it, there's actually 2 edit buttons. So there's an edit up here and there's an edit down here. I guess there's actually even more than that, right? There's a couple of edits over there. So be careful. I mean, you'll figure, as soon as you do it, you'll figure it out. But if I click edit here, I'm really just editing the name of it. So I could rename it here, the description, what plan it's using. But I've had people come in and you told me to edit it, and I'm editing and I'm just not getting what I want. This is I wish they were named different. This is edit definition of the flow. This is edit properties of the flow. So make sure you hit edit up in the top left corner if you want to go in and you're making changes or adding to it or whatever you need to do. That's the edit for editing the definition of the flow. In addition to that, there's these advanced options that are available. So if you wanted to do things like only pull back certain columns for performance reason, or you want to filter how many rows are being pulled back or run it as a different user, those are all under advanced options. Down here, you have things like again, limit the columns by view. So if you wanted to not get all items, you only wanted to do, some of the columns, you had a view that only specified certain columns. Again, for performance reasons, you could do that under advanced options. Testing. So as we mentioned, now that we've done a couple of tests manually, done some test runs, we can now go to our test if we wanted to test this again. And now manually is still an option, but automatically is an option. So what automatically says is, hey, you've done some manual testing, but we don't want you to have to enter that data over and over, because maybe I've made some changes. Maybe I came in here and I removed main phone, and maybe I put something else, or maybe I did some concatenation or something like that. So now that I've made a change, I want to test the change. Let's actually put something else in there. Oh, we don't. Well, let's see. What do we have if we go to Power Apps and we do an add record? So we've been doing name and phone. Do we have fax? Let's see if we can find fax. So we'll come back over here and see if fax is one of the options. So we'll come down and look for fax. There's the fax, and again, there's fax associated with each address, but I'm getting the main fax. So we'll put that back. So we've updated now to look for the fax instead of the phone. Save that. Now we need to run a test. And in theory, if we run one of the previous triggers, it's not going to have fax, so fax should be blank. So when I do a test here and do an automatic, and I use one of these previous triggers, let's do the very begin one, right? I think that was Lito's Pizza, so we'll test that. So I don't have to do the data entry again. So now it's running. It's looking through the inputs, and if I scroll through here, you'll see fax. There's Lito Pizza, but there was no fax entered, so fax is going to be null. And then when we come down here, it still succeeds because fax is not or phone number is not a required field. But if I go, and look at my data, you'll see that the phone number is blank for that additional Lito's Pizza that we just triggered. Yep, and there it is. It's blank. So probably what we need to do is go back and do an actual test. So we'll come in here and say, test run, and then down here we'll put a fax. So you close that. And now, because we actually filled in the fax field, we should get the phone number filled in with the fax once this finishes running. There's a test run with the new fax number. So going back, we've got the proper edit. We saw how we got the flow to look at the different changes. Luckily, they're all, they've all, and then there's the automatic test, and it's indicated slightly differently because it says test succeeded versus these are all just manual tests, or I guess you really don't know if it was a manual test or if it was an actual somebody using it. And that's why this one's identified as that one we knew was an actual test. I could turn it off. I can do other kind of analytics. It's really again, just the possibilities are pretty unlimited. All right, so to recap, we showed you how to create a flow, how to create entities in Dataverse, although it used to be known as CDS, how to add a record, run the flow, see the results in SharePoint, view the details of the flow results. Oh, export and import a flow. I knew I was forgetting something. So if I jump back and I want to actually share this flow and with others, like so they can download it and send it to an email, or if I'm doing, where I've liked the flow as it is, but now I want to go and put it into production. Right, as I mentioned, this is in my development environment. So if I actually want to get, send this out, if someone gave me a flow, I would import it here. Here's where I could click import, and then I would go whatever file, the flow file that they give me, I could go and upload it and bring it in. So if I want to export a flow, I have to do that through the browser as well, though it is a little tricky. So let's see, if I come here to this new one and I want to export it, I come here and I can do the export. So this is where I would go and put the flow out. I'm able to do this because I'm in Power Automate. If I go to Power Apps and I look at my flows, let's do this. Where is it? Go to there, here, flows. So this is another one of those gotchas. If you're in flows from Power Apps and you try to export, oh, now it's showing up. So no, it's not showing up, right? Export, get a flow identifier. It's a little different, right? So you're not really exporting here. And this is one of the things some of my users will call me up and say, Dave, I'm in Power Apps and I created a flow and I'm trying to export it and it's not allowing me to make the zip. And they'll say things like, maybe I don't have permissions, maybe. No, it's just the context is wrong. So you don't want to be in Power Apps flows to do the export. You want to make sure that you're in Power Automate my flows and then do the export. So from there, I can go ahead and do an export. And now I'm actually creating a zip file with all of my triggers, all of my actions. I give it a name. So this is my account notification flow. Now the environment, maybe this is going to be production, whatever, just whatever it's going to belong into. And then I come down here and I, review the content. It's got the flow. And when people import this, I want them to update the flow because I want them to choose their own, in this case, their own connection to SharePoint and their own connection to Dataverse. So that's what these are saying is, hey, when they import this, or I can also force create as new. So a couple different choices there. Let me close this and get that out of the way. I think I like the update. So if it already exists, just create a new one. If it doesn't exist, it's going to create it new, and then make sure that they choose their connection. So when I have that where I want it, I can do an export, and now it's going to create that zip file that someone else could, I could email it to someone. There it is right there. And then they can go into their environment. Maybe they switch to the production environment, or maybe it's a completely different tenant, and they are able to import that and then reuse that flows. That's another way of sharing your flow. The way I was doing earlier, but I didn't have this particular wasn't set up for the licensing. If you share it this way, what that does is that shares it with another user in my organization so they can collaborate on the flow with me. But by exporting it, I'm basically giving someone a copy and they can do whatever they want with it. All right, so now I think I covered everything I wanted to cover in my demo. If I come back over here. Oh, I think yes, okay. A note about environments. So I've been knocking around different environments. You saw David Patrick, that was my developer environment. You saw Mad SharePoint, that was the default environment. There's other environments. There's things like trial environments that you can set up. They're nice because they can actually be converted to production. The David Patrick environment you saw was part of the Power Apps community plan. So I have all my developers sign up for the community plan. And when they sign up, if their tenant permits it, it will then create their own developer environment in production, but with their own name. So again, the way that looks like it's, this is, if you say this is the Mad SharePoint production environment, David Patrick it's a whole nother database. I don't know if I made that clear earlier. So if I go to my accounts or my flows, you see, in my, this is the Mad SharePoint. There's an old one I did, but if I switch to David Patrick, you're going to see a different set of flows. So it's a completely different database, two different databases, two different Dataverse environments, and same thing with the actual data. If I go to the data and click on, the account information under David Patrick, I got all those fast food places, right? If I click here and click data, but if I switch it to Mad SharePoint and click data, you're going to see not that many. I didn't put that many records in here, so I think there's like 6 records in here. But again, just to drive home the point that there's different environments. Yeah, so it's just got some, some dummy data in there. So there's different environments. Signing up for the Power Apps community plan will get you your own environment in whatever tenant you're in, whether it's a production tenant or it's a test tenant. Talks about all the things you can do with that Power App community plan. It's totally free, so it's definitely something you should investigate. If you use Dynamics 365, you can use the admin center and look at the different types. So there's that developer one that people set up as part of the community plan. There's production environments, there's trial environments, there's even sandbox environments where if you set up a sandbox environment, you can do some things and then promote that and work with that as well. We talked about some of the tips and tricks. Watch out for, sometimes you'll still see CDS in certain places, but it's really all Dataverse now. Using that flow checker can really help when you're creating flows to make sure you didn't leave something out or you touched in something wrong. When you're sharing flows, make sure you know where your flow is and between the different environments. And we talked about, clicking on the right edit. So things to watch out for. This is just an example, back in the day, I think if I typed common data, it wasn't showing up. So make sure you type Dataverse. If you're setting up your your Power Apps community plan, you do have to create a database. So when you first sign up, you create your environment, and then you have to create a database. You say you start your trial. You walk through, you set, get asked you for some information, and then you're finally allowed to, you get your own actual environment where you can create your database. I think you have to choose like a currency, and then there's an option to actually include sample. This is really great. That's why I had so much data in the example I was showing you guys, because I included the sample apps. So you're not starting with a blank slate. Be careful. Don't be too impatient like I am sometimes. I created the first time I did it. I went, I clicked on it and said, "Where's all my data?" And said something went wrong. Nothing was wrong. I just did it too fast. I waited a few minutes. I hit refresh, and then everything was there. So just don't be impatient like me. If you want your own Office 365 tenant, Microsoft, they renamed this. Now it's called the M365 Developer Plan. It's the same plan. It's just a different name, but you can join it. There's a link in my slides, or you can just bing it and you'll find it. But it doesn't cost you anything. 90-day 365 E5 developer subscription. I think it comes with 25 users, not meant for production, definitely just for development, test, and exam preparation. You can choose, just like with the Power Apps community plan, you can choose to load sample data packs. And what I love about this is every 90 days, as long as I'm using it, Microsoft renews it for me automatically. I've had one of these for 7 years now. So that just every few months, I get an email. Congratulations, we've renewed your account. I'm like, great, because I've been using it. I appreciate that. I usually get a lot of questions about licensing, and this is my, the licensing. I know in my demo I was using, you might have saw a Diamond. I was using a Premier. And it costs a certain amount of money. So there's a link here. If you want to read all up about licensing, go click this link and you'll find all about how it's licensed and the intricacies of that. That's it. I do appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully you got a thing or two from the talk. If you do have questions, we might have a minute or two for a question. And if you want, you can always tweet me later at David E. Patrick. I love to get tweets and gets me thinking about different stuff. So thanks again. Appreciate it.